Ave Maria, and welcome to Fatima Reflections. Today's reflection is going to be about Jacinta, Blessed Jacinta. In February of 1920, Jacinta was taken to Lisbon. She was brought to Lisbon to go to a hospital because of an illness she had. And in this hospital there was a mother superior of a religious community of nuns, and her name was Mother Godinho. Jacinta revealed some interesting insights to Mother Godinho. Amongst these is the following reflection that Jacinta gave to her. Our Lady had appeared to Jacinta when she was in the hospital, and Our Lady told Jacinta, as she spoke these words to Mother Godinho, "My dear mother, the sins that bring the most souls to hell are the sins of the flesh. The sins that bring the most souls to hell are the sins of the flesh." These words of Jacinta are words for us to take heed in a time where the sins of the flesh are displayed across every sort of medium: television, films, books, the internet. That the sins of the flesh are glorified in the times that we live in. And we see that there is a demonic attack against the virtue of purity, that virtue by which we keep intact that purity and remain faithful to God's commandments. We must reflect that in creating us, God has called us to holiness. He's called us to become saints. And sin turns us away from God and distorts that reflection of God in our soul and makes our soul darkened by the stain of mortal sin. We know that when Adam and Eve fell in the garden, man's concupiscence was weakened, that man was easily tempted as one of the effects of original sin. Man became weak and in his concupiscence, and that we are called to put our passions in control, to be in control of our passions, by which they do not rule over us, but we keep them in check by keeping ourselves pure in mind, heart, body, and soul. Sins of the flesh are glorified in the time that we live in, and people say that there's no such thing as sin. People say that it doesn't matter what you do, you'll get to heaven. But Our Lady revealed to Jacinta that the sins of the flesh bring people to hell. And of course, these sins of the flesh can come in many sordid different ways. Sins against the sixth commandment, premarital relations, people that commit sins with themselves, people that are married and commit the sin of adultery, betraying the marriage bond to their spouse. And of course we see all sorts of unnatural acts in our time being held up as normal and being held up as being glorified, especially the sins of the flesh with someone of the same sex. And it needs to be addressed that all these different cases that I've mentioned, each individual is called to keep themselves pure by a life of prayer, by a sacramental life. Someone may say, that's okay for Catholics. You have the teachings of the Church. I'm not a Catholic, so I'm not bound by your teaching. Well, God has provided for all of us through the natural law. By the natural law, I know that by my conscience guiding me that it is wrong for me to have for a person to commit sins with someone outside of marriage, or to commit sins of adultery, to betray one's spouse, or sins with the same sex. That these sins are also covered under the natural law. And there's a great deception in our time, especially with this last sin that I've talked about, where people are trying to uphold this as normal, that it is to be accepted by society, and even with Hollywood promoting this with an agenda, it gets better. That And of course, we want to recognize that for those who suffer same-sex attractions, that we must accept them as our brothers and sisters and love them and encourage them to carry their cross in following Christ. But to say that it gets better when we give in to sin is a lie and a deception of Satan. Sin never makes anything better. Sin separates us from God. Sin distorts that beauty of our soul, which is which is created in the image and likeness of God. And it enslaves us to Satan. It enslaves us to him who hates us. The devil wants people who have these same-sex attractions to think in our times that this is normal, that there's no choice but to give in to these acts, and that it gets better in time, that to have such an orientation, one should not try to fight it and do penance and to abstain from such acts, but give into it, and to give into immorality and sin. And this is the deception of the devil. Sin never makes anything better. Sin never solves a problem. What we need to do is to turn to Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Our Lord Jesus says, if you love me, pick up your cross and follow me. And that when we're tempted, we must recognize whatever temptation we may have is a call to unite us to the cross of Christ and to fight against that enemy who hates us, to keep ourselves pure and to keep ourselves in the grace of God. And we do this through prayer, especially to our Blessed Mother. Our Blessed Mother crushes the head of the serpent, and the rosary is a powerful remedy against the sins of the flesh. The rosary is as St. Padre Pio said, the devil's scourge. It's a powerful remedy to preserve purity and chastity, as well as frequent reception of the sacraments, going to confession frequently, and receiving Jesus, the bread of angels, in Holy Communion. And so we need to recognize that the remedies are there for us to abstain from sins of the flesh, to conquer them, that they do not control us, but we get the victory over them by remaining in the grace of God, by remaining faithful to Christ. Let us not allow ourselves to be led astray by Hollywood, movie stars, and all these false prophets of our time who tell us to give in to sin, to give in to the sins of the flesh, and to not have any shame for them. This is a deception of Satan. Our Lady told Jacinta, many souls go to hell for sins of the flesh. In fact, she said, the most souls go to hell are for the sins of the flesh. Let us recognize Our Lady is calling us to live chaste, pure, holy lives in anticipation of the kingdom of heaven, and that we receive the graces we need to do this through the help that God gives us through the prayers and sacraments and the devotions we have. There is no excuse for us when we fall into sin, but God's mercy is always waiting for us to return to Him, to seek His healing through the sacrament of penance, and to begin again to follow Him. God never asks the impossible. Let us take courage, and let us look to our Blessed Mother, who loves us as her children, and who wants to give us her assistance and motherly help to fight the enemy when he tempts us, that we don't give in to his temptations, that we as soldiers of Christ remain steadfast in following Christ, and do not allow ourselves to be enslaved by his temptations and the weaknesses of the flesh. May our Blessed Mother's words give us encouragement. I will never forsake you, and I will be your refuge and the road that will lead you to God. Thank you for joining us in this episode of Fatima Reflections. Ave Maria.